Hey everybody, so we are in Charleston, South Carolina today at Charles Towne Landing State Historic Site, and we are here for the firing of the guns on the Ashley. So they go over there and they shoot the cannons off, and they showed you how they would have looked back in the day, and put on a little demonstration so you can actually see the cannons go whoo. So are y'all ready?
Ready.
I'm always ready, so let's go. Plus it's hot out here, so we got to go. If the traffic light does not turn, we have arrived at Charles Towne Landing so we can see the great guns on the Ashley. That's not my best shot right there, but anyway, we have arrived. Of course I got my pass ready. It's right up there.
Arrived.
Always ready. It's such a beautiful drive back here. And it is hot, so this will be a short and sweet video. So we can come back to the air conditioning.
There is no easy road or path between the various dwellings of the town. But what? No easy road or path. Like these guys are just like, oh, we're just gonna go build some houses. You're gonna like coordinate with your neighbor to make sure you guys are all like in a line and like you can get to your neighbor's house? Nah, we're just gonna go build a house. Where? Somewhere over there. You know, and then when you look at the maps that they drew, there's all these property lines that do this like, now part of that's getting around marshes, right? It's getting around little fingers of marshes, which let me tell you, the people in England absolutely hate it. They wanted to see these like really pretty like straight property lines and these little intersecting, you know. cuts, and it doesn't. The property lines they look like a third 3-year-old drew them. Like they're wild. We shouldn't even discuss at this point the fact that our first surveyor is also an incompetent moron. Anybody here ever been to Sullivan's Island? Okay, cool. Has anybody here ever thought to themselves, I am a moron? I have, almost every day. But you know what I've never done? I've never had an island named after me. I kid you not, this guy Florence O'Sullivan, he comes over here on the First Fleet. He like weasels his way into like accepting credit for the Lord's proprietors, like on their credit accounts in the Caribbean. He gets elected to the position of surveyor, and I only find out like years later that pretty much every survey line the man drew was wrong. You know, your property ends here, and you know your line is over here, and then your neighbor's line is like over here. You know, nothing's right. It's so bad that they're like, dude, you're done. You're not part of the council. You're not part of the county. We're gonna go. Hey, you know what? We're gonna give you a little cannon, and we're gonna go put you on this island. Out there on the edge of the harbor, and your entire existence needs to be focused on if you see a ship that isn't one of ours, you fire this gun so that they're like the doorbell, right? Like if you see something you don't like, you fire the gun so that everybody over here can like hear it and know that hey, maybe something's up. And yet now the guy gets a whole island named after himself because he messed up so badly. He got kicked out of Charlestown and had to go hang out on a beach all by himself. Ridiculous, right? I know, I'm bopping and bipping all over the place, guys. But I think the important thing that I would stress here before we really start talking about the guns and the whole kind of crux of that program is that so much of the defense of the colony didn't rest in physical armament. I mean, it did, but it rested in the choices made by that First Fleet to pick a site that was naturally incredibly well defended, and also, you know, a degree of pride to realize that they're not going to be here forever. I can tell you guys, by 1672, there's already cannons on the peninsula. There's already houses on the peninsula. By 1678, when the formal seat of government. So that's what happens, by the way, guys. This is the roundaboutest answer you've ever gotten to why the city went from here to there. But it's not that in 1680 that everybody here just said, you know what, we're done with this site. We're just going to pick up the whole town and move. It was happening from day one. The only thing that changed is not that where people lived or what they were doing. What changed was where the seat of government. Between 1670 and 1680, the governing body for Carolina, the Grand Council, met on this property. This is where the records of the colony were kept. This is where the primary armory and storehouse of gunpowder in the colony was. But after 1680, that governing body stops meeting here and starts meeting over on the peninsula. It's not that everybody else here moved. It's that the governing body moved. By 1680, when the governing body moved, there's already a town over there. There's already a fort. There's already a town on James Island. There's already a fort on James Island. It's not that this town just disappeared. It's that the town naturally, like, its function is really for that initial landing, that initial defense of the colony in those first few years. And it's really clear by 1672, forward, we continue to move down that timeline, that the focus here isn't staying in one big nucleus kind of settlement. These guys were driven by agriculture. They were driven by the economic desire to create what they couldn't create in England. And that is not accomplished by staying, you know, inside of a wall, inside of a fort, inside of a town. It's done by expansion. And so it's a good thing to keep in your head that, right, it's not that the town moved. It'd be the same thing. Like, what happens tomorrow if the state capital moves from Columbia to Greenville? Kind of safety things out of the way. First of all, welcome to Charles Towne Landing State Historic Site. Welcome inside of the fort at Carolina. My name is CJ. I'm going to be hanging out with you guys today as we talk about the fears that fortified Charlestown. From a safety perspective, guys, it's clearly pretty warm, right? If you don't have water on you, there's a water fountain just over here to your right. You should, you know, hydrate. We like to say hydrate, don't dehydrate. If you guys need water, it's right over there. I generally try to put this whole program as much into the shade as I can. But if we get less cloud cover, do not hesitate to like move off to where you've got a patch of shade. I understand that I am not interesting enough to make you guys just stand in the Carolina sun in late June, July. It's July now, isn't it? Ah, it's July. Look at that. I'm like sitting here trying to remember what day it is. lastly, you guys, we are handling what's kind of modernly essentially labeled as a Class A explosive. It's not fake. It's really gunpowder. It really does blow up. It can be very dangerous. All of the people that are part of our crews have gone through some pretty extensive safety training. We'd ask you to respect that. Please don't think, man, I really need a picture of the front of that gun. Okay, Wayne's down there. I've instructed Wayne to pretty much just tackle anybody that tries to get past him. You know, don't try to sneak around me because I get too excited talking about like 17th century fortifications. Hang out here. When the program is over, you guys are welcome to come up. Actually, you can come up onto the gun platforms, get a closer look at the guns. You can ask us all the questions you want to ask us. But during the firing program, we are going to ask you guys to stay pretty much kind of where you are. Lastly, safety note, you guys, it is loud, no doubt. It is not so loud that from where you guys are that you have to cover your ears. If you are more comfortable, I will give you guys plenty of warning before we metaphorically pull the trigger. Lastly, for those of you with small children and for our friends over in the back that have animals, obviously you know how loud, startling noises affect them. Please keep that in mind. Again, I'll give you guys plenty of warning before the actual boom happens. So, before I start chatting about things, do you guys have any questions about all that fun, boring, modern safety stuff? Beautiful, guys. Welcome to Charles Towne Landing once again. So, today, you guys, we're going to be blank firing. So that's pretty important, too, from a safety perspective. No cannonballs today. I know, it's so cool if we could actually shoot cannonballs. I will tell you guys a secret. Every one of these guns up here has actually fired a cannonball before, which is pretty cool. But here's the other really cool thing. These two guns, both with the proper elevation and location, can fire a solid iron projectile over a mile in distance. Now, from where you guys are today, if you look to your left, across the marsh, across the Ashley River to the city of Charleston, from where you're standing to the campus of the Citadel, that's the Military College of South Carolina, is 4,080 feet. You're all putting those dots together right now? If I put a cannonball in there, I'm literally shooting it at a school. A school that admittedly has way bigger guns than we do and way more people who use them than we do, so no cannonballs today, okay? Now, what's cool, though, is that, what are cannonballs made out of, guys?
Iron.
Made out of iron. Where does iron come from, my Minecraft friends?
Iron ore.
Cave.
Caves! And where do we find caves? In the
Underground.
ground. You know what's under this ground? Not iron. You know, there's not even rock, man. We got sand and clay, and that is it. Like, this entire part of the coastline from here to, like, Columbia, it's nothing but sand, nothing but clay. If I want cannonballs, I have to order them from somewhere. I have to go to someone that has access to iron, and I have to order cannonballs. So, historically, the last thing these guys are going to be doing is just sending out cannonballs, right, for no good reason. Which means that if you aren't directly in line of one of these batteries, there's no point in us actually putting a bullet into the gun. There are still lots of reasons for us to fire them without a bullet. It's still really loud. It can still be kind of scary. It also gives these guys a chance to practice using the ammunition, using the actual steps rather than just walking through it dry. And so we know that that's what they would have done. They would have been using smaller loads to help practice the guns with. They also could be blank firing the guns as a form of sort of, again, as a sort of defense, as a way to frighten off potential enemies. And that's really what we're going to be talking a lot about here today. Now, technically, the guns that we have on today, you guys, also are not 350 years old. That'd be pretty unsafe, even for us to blank fire a 350-year-old cannon. Instead, these are replicas based on original guns from the Tower of London from the mid 17th century. We know that in 1669, Charles II donated 12 iron great guns for the defense of Carolina. Now, I stress that verbiage there. He doesn't say we donated 12 iron cannons. He says we donated 12 iron great guns. A cannon in the 17th century specifically meant that it fired a 24-pound projectile. Neither one of these guns are that big. We know that of the 12 that he sent, 8 of them were called sakers, a word derived from the Arabic word for falcon or hawk. Later in the 17th century, they'd simply be referred to as a 6-pounder, meaning it's firing a 6-pound iron shot. That's that first gun with Quinn there in the bright red jacket on Linstock. Now, the gun to their right is called a demi-culverin. Demi, of course, Latin for lesser or smaller. Culverin from the Latin for serpent or snake. And a gun that is capable of firing a 12-pound iron projectile. And so those are the 2 guns sent from England. 8 Sakers, 4 demi-culverins, 12 iron guns to defend the waterway approach to this fledgling colony of Carolina. Now, the first time that these guys are really going to be called into action is, in fact, this time of year. Now, we know they arrived in April. And show of hands, who thinks April in Carolina is pretty comfortable? It's pretty great. What about July? Not really. It's really the time to like sit in the shade and not do anything. What's funny is that these guys had actually spent too much time like trying to, can you believe this, you guys, trying to build houses, plant fields. You believe it? You know what they never found the time to do? Build walls, mount guns. And in July of 1670, Native Americans allied to the English settlement here actually brought word to the colony that Spain, St. Augustine, was mounting an attack on this fledgling colony of Carolina. In fact, the Spanish had been given explicit instructions to dislodge the English from San Jorge. We know that 3 Spanish warships, hundreds of Spanish regular soldiers, as 14 smaller boats called periaugers, and hundreds of allied Native Americans to the Spanish cause, all left St. Augustine with one intention, and that was to starve out or attack Charlestown. Now that word comes back to us in late July. So you can imagine when someone says, hey, by the way, all that work you've been putting off, digging ditches, building walls, moving around 2,000-pound guns, chop, chop. The time is coming. We know that that's when they do it. They built that wooden palisade wall to defend that 150-foot stretch of terra firma. We know that they mounted 7 of their great guns facing the river in that last week of July. At the first week of August, that Spanish ship is anchored just a few miles from where we're standing at the mouth of the Charleston harbor. Now, what's really cool about that ship being out there is that it can't see us. Another benefit to coming to this property and not the peninsula. Even if there's a ship parked right in this creek, you can't see it from the harbor. You're too far around the bend, too far up the river. So a lot of our security is still intact. The Spanish are hanging out waiting for something to happen. We know that those smaller boats go out to places like Morris Island, go into some of these other barrier islands around the harbor and around the river, and they start to set up ambushes for English ships coming in or out of the rivers. While those boats are away from the Spanish warships, a great north wind blows through. A wind so strong that it picks up the Spanish warships off of their anchors and pushes them back out into the ocean, scattering those warships. And without, of course, any ability to communicate, we know that those 3 Spanish ships spend weeks trying to find each other before they come back. In fact, the day after those ships got pushed out into the ocean, the Carolina, our flagship, returns from Virginia with much needed food supplies for the early colony. When she does, she interacts with Spanish Native Americans on Morris Island. They trade musket shots. Don't ask me how nobody was hit. Nobody was. But when the Carolina comes back here and warns the colony that there is still a threat, there is still a danger out near its rivers and islands, the militia is called together here inside of the fort for the scaling of the great guns. And that's what we're going to do for you guys. We're going to scale these great guns. Now, John, are you calling today? Tom is going to call. So guys, this is Tom, the gentleman in the orange coat. As Tom calls the individual commands for the gunners, I'm going to explain what those gunners are doing up on the platform. And all of that will conclude, of course, with the guns actually firing. So again, we are getting closer, but I'll still make sure to give you guys a good symbol for when we're about to go. Mr. Glad.
Gunners, have a care.
Have a care, you guys, is the fanciest way to say,
The worm.
get ready. So the command, advance the worm
Search the piece.
and search the piece. Now the worm is a large iron corkscrew at the end of a stave that's going to be turned around inside of that barrel. What you're hoping to do is to dislodge, to pull out any kind of obstruction that might be inside of the barrel that could get in the way of the actual loading process.
Advance the sponge.
We're going to advance the sponge,
Tend the vent.
tend the vent,
Sponge the piece.
sponge the piece. Now what this is doing, guys, is actually telling us that air can travel from the muzzle to the vent. Muzzle, of course, is the business end of the gun where the bullet goes in and out. The vent is a small hole in the very back of the gun that's going to be used, or we will build the fuse to ignite the charge on the inside. So by pushing that sponge into the barrel, we we know that air has traveled from the muzzle through the vent without an obstruction. You'll also notice that now the gunner on the back left of the gun has got their thumb over the back of the gun. They're sealing over that vent, making sure that no sparks from the lens stocks that will be used to ignite the gun can find their way inside of the tube during the loading process. Now, the charges that we're using today, again, we're using 1 pound of gunpowder for the Saker and 2 pounds of gunpowder for the demi-culverin. Historically, the Saker would have used between 4 and 5 pounds to fire a charge, and the demi-culverin would have used between 6 and 9 pounds to fire a charge. Now, that gunpowder is highly flammable, but only an explosive when confined and compressed. You confine it by placing it inside the barrel, and you compress it with a tool called the ram. So you guys will notice that that sound changes, right? Every time they ram it. What that is that's that cartridge compressing into the back. So it's gone from a highly flammable charge inside of a tube to a compressed charge inside of a tube, which means now it's capable of exploding.
Switch your sponge.
Now, the gunner on the back right of the gun.
Andy, switch sponge.
Yep. The gunner on the back right is going to draw out of their pouch a bronze wire called a prick. They're going to drive that wire through the vent into the inside of the gun and actually cut open that compressed charge on the inside. The wire is removed, and then they will take loose gunpowder and pour it into the vent, connecting the compressed charge on the inside with a trail of loose gunpowder on the top of the gun. Now that gunpowder, again, not confined nor compressed, so it won't explode, but it will burn. And the idea is that that powder burns in a trail, traveling inside the gun and igniting the powder on the inside. The last command will be tend your match. That means that the gunner on the lens stock will blow on that coal of his match to make sure that it's nice and hot. Then they will say, by your command, and then the captain of the gun will simply say, give fire. Now we're still priming. Chris is a notoriously slow primer. Meticulous. Slow. I shouldn't make too much fun of Chris. He is on the different
End the match.
So guys, if you wanted to cover
All right,
your
it's
ears,
time. If you want to cover your ears.
You want to put your ears down? It's loud.
Gun 4, give fire.
hanging out on Morris Island right now, and all day, that's all you heard. How confident do you think you'd feel about attacking? Look at that, I'm gone. Sign my ticket, out of here, right? Like, and that's what happens. So we know that they spend that day scaling the great guns. And we know that members of the English militia actually leave here with Native American allies to go search out these encampments on the islands. And they report back that the Spanish Native Americans were in so much fear of the guns and by the amount of noise being made from Charlestown that they went back to those boats and abandoned the enterprise entirely. Now, that is to say that we just got off of that first fight pretty much because of a tropical storm or a hurricane of some kind and because we made a lot of noise, right? Like, that's pretty cool. You know what else it is? It's kind of lucky. Like, I mean, right, it's the threat of violence is sometimes almost as valuable as violence itself. And that's what saves us. Early on, it's that threat of being prepared. That preparedness that shows off the defense of the colony. Now, we know, though, that Spain doesn't just, rewrite. We know that Spain is going to go back in between 1670 and 1674. The notable one is a guy by the name of, why did I just forget this guy's name? John, what's my Spanish spy's name?
Antonio Comunez.
Thank you, John. I don't deserve to be talking to you guys today. Just so you know, it's just right out of my head. Antonio Comunez, you guys, he's a Spanish soldier and a spy who comes here in 1672. He's the one that describes that palisade as a wall with heavy logs. He's the one that talks about the 12 iron guns by 1672 being faced towards the river. He also says by 1672 that there are, and this tracks with English numbers, 250 men capable of bearing arms in the colony. He says beside the 12 iron guns, there are 18 other pieces of artillery inside of this fort in 1672. When he goes back to St. Augustine, he tells the governor that you do not possess the ships nor the men to adequately attack and capture Charlestown. Show of hands, who's ever been to St. Augustine, Florida? Last month, that's cool. So you guys are all probably at least passingly familiar with the Castillo San Marco. It is the oldest still standing fortification built in the United States, you guys. It's built out of this really cool shell of concrete called patina. They started construction of that in the fall of 1672. As a direct response to Antonio Comenius' visit to Charlestown, he goes back to St. Augustine and says, you don't have the people, you don't have the ships. In fact, I'd start being worried if I were you that England's not going to be content with staying in Carolina, but they might want to start coming a little south. And really, you guys, this is the start. From 1670 all the way through the mid-18th century, there is a sort of Cold War tension between Carolina and Florida, because we represent this sort of amorphous frontier of these colonial sort of powers. It's not even until the founding of Georgia in the 1730s when some of that weight's taken off of Carolina, because now they can let it be Georgia's problem. But on that behalf, you guys, I just want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out with us here in the sun. Give me one more round of applause for our volunteers and our staff on the guns. Woo! Woo! And guys, thank you guys so much for coming out. If you want to take a closer look at the guns, if you want to talk super nerdy stuff, come talk to me. If you want to maybe join our cannon crew, come talk to me, right? Whatever you want, let's talk about it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to get some water.
Are we going back?
Yep.
The boat's back there. The house is over here. I'm going to the house. I'm going to the house. So over here we have a bowling alley. It's kind of cute. Yeah. All right, so we going bowling, what, 1670 style? Let's see how bad I am at this. I didn't even hit it. Alright, so maybe I need to put some more force behind that. Got one down. I do not have a calling to be a bowler. Well, put them all back up and I'll do it. So she's getting ready to show me up that she can do it better than I can. I'll follow them. Well, you got something on your first shot. Boom. Got some down that time. Okay, since we have discovered we could not bowl back in the day, probably can't bowl in this day either, we're gonna go into the old house. So sometimes you can come in here and they're actually cooking in there, but not today. I guess they'll let her at the cannons. And then one time we were in here and it actually told us something interesting. They used to fit like 12 people up there to sleep. So that's just a massive amount of people. So this says a common lodging. Indentured servants and enslaved Africans were the backbone of the new colony, and their labor ensured its survival. Hundreds arrived in the years after 1670, and the new settlement must have included some sort of housing for this labor force. In 1674, one of the Lord's proprietors instructed his deputy to build a common lodging for his servants. The house before you, constructed in 2007, is a representation of this type of dwelling. Although archaeologists have not yet found the remains of such a structure, it is possible that a similar building once stood in the colony. This one over here says, seeking wealth, sowing servitude. Land abounded in the new Carolina colony. The challenge lay in finding a money-making crop and a labor force to produce it. The Lord's proprietors who funded the colony directed the colonists to experiment in order to determine which crops would ultimately bring profits to their investment. To increase the labor supply, the proprietors promised European indentured servants the opportunity to own land and guaranteed each planter absolute power and authority of slaves. Almost as soon as they arrived, the colonists and their workers turned their hands and hoes to the back-breaking task of clearing land and planting. And that over there is a replication of how the garden would have looked. So we're moving right along. That's if you want to scan the QR code, you could hear what they have to say. It's not. You got to scan that, and that plays on your phone. It just says explore here. So that kind of makes it a little hard to do that. If you want to, that might be good for the video. I said if you want to, that might be good for the video. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And this says crime and punishment tied to the usual tree. What constitutes a crime? In early Charlestown, the majority of prosecuted crimes involved slander against the government or actions that endangered the colony or threatened the profit. This differed from New England colonies where religious or moral laws ruled daily life. A harsh yet common punishment was to tie the offender to the usual tree, where lashes were well laid on the naked back. Lesser offenders received time in the stocks or pillory, while some were only locked in a room. Humiliating and sometimes painful, these punishments occurred for all to see, creating a deterrent for others. So Dad has locked himself over here in this stock. He's saying, hurry up, hurry up. So Dad, how would you have liked that?
I would.
I can't believe you did that.
I don't think you did. You think I would do something like that? Well, I'll stick yours in there. I ain't doing that. I ain't no crazy. You took a picture of it.
I did take a picture of it.
All right, let's go to the wall.
Dad was being good for the video. For the video, that's what you say. What you say? You did it for the channel. Isn't that what other popular YouTubers say? Even though we're not popular, we did it for the channel. So this over here would be the palisade wall that is built. I think Dad's going to inspect it. However, there is an opening up here. He wants to see if he can see over the wall. I think he can successfully see over the wall.
You see me walk through the wall?
Yeah, we're gonna all walk through the wall. You're like, watch this. And over there is where they have a house replicated. And that other building is an archaeology building. But it's too hot for all that today. And now Dad is walking through the wall. Since he was looking over the wall a while ago, now you can walk through it.
Go up there.
If you want to, I'll take a picture of you. I see that. No, that's a cannon. That shows how the cannon would have been coming over the wall. It's hot out here. How many times did you hit your head today?
Okay, baby. We're gonna go
you're
in the
fine.
AC right now.
So this talks about the Old Towne plantation. By 1700, this site was known as Old Towne Plantation, and it was used for farming for almost 300 years. The last owners, Dr. and Mrs. Joseph I. Waring, renovated the overseer's house as their home and created 80 acres of landscape gardens. In 1969, they sold more than 650 acres to the state of South Carolina, which developed a park here for the South Carolina Tricentennial of 1970. The site became a state park in 1971. And on this side it said Charles Towne. The first permanent English settlement in what is now South Carolina was established here in 1670, named for King Charles II. The town was built on Albemarle Point on the west bank of the Ashley River. It began in 1670 to 71 with a palisaded fort and a few houses. As it grew, additional lots were laid out across the Ashley River on Oyster Point. In 1680, the proprietors of the colony moved the capital to that site in present-day downtown Charleston. So we're going to go ahead and end the video for the guns on the artillery, or whatever it was called, at Charles Towne Landing State Historic Site. So how did y'all enjoy it?
It was good.
It was good and it was hot. It is 89 degrees outside right now, so it is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So they're going to shoot the guns off today at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. We made to 1 o'clock, so in any minute they should be shooting them off again. And used to, they shot them off more than once. They said it's some kind of safety thing, because I thought they used to shoot them off, what, 3 times?
He
Something like
said
that.
Each time you shoot them out,
You have to wait 15 minutes.
Wait 15 minutes before you shoot them again.
That must be something new, because I thought they used to go and then
Well,
you
that
could get
might
like,
have been when they used live
I don't
ammunition.
know what they used to do. But anyway, it was pretty. And it was hot. So I did show you a little bit of Charles Towne Landing. I'll come back one day, probably in the dead of winter, and do the whole video, because they have a zoo here. And I can't do the boat in the dead of winter because it goes out for repair each year. And they got the cannons, and sometimes they shoot off muskets. And then they've got the garden, they got the Legree warehouse house, they got all that. So one day I'll come and do a complete walkthrough, but it was not today. My main goal for today was to show the cannons.
They do Founders Day.
That's in April. I have to work every year on that day. I don't know what it is. Usually I'm off on Saturdays, but every single
I
time
thought they have one in
they have,
October.
no, it's in April. Whenever they do the celebration. Yeah. So anyway, that is what that is. But I think we had a great time. That was our whole intention today, was to come to Charles Towne Landing and see the guns. We were successful on that. So that's it for this one. So
Subscribe if you haven't.
if you don't mind, of
I would
course.
appreciate it.
She does appreciate it. I appreciate it too.
Well, I look to see how many you got on there.
I know. She can tell me more than I
get
know.
upset when they unsubscribe.
Maybe they just don't like our charming personality. That's the only thing I can figure. So, you had a good time, Dad?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He's always in the car whenever we come to Charles Towne Landing, because this is his favorite state park. So, if you say going to Charles Towne Landing, he wants to come too. But he doesn't always come, but he likes to come if the cannons are being shot. So, toodaloo!
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.